I held on to unbroken faith. My muscles expanded from the powerful stories. It was like a dragon's blood was flowing through my heart. Move while the force is building up. We have to make a gap. Yu Jung-hyuk came forward first. I will buy as much time as possible. The movements of the tentacles were more active than before, and the ground was almost in ruins. We tried to move this guy as far away from the party members as possible. Up! Yu Jung-hyuk raised his magic power and moved forward. Meanwhile, I moved behind the Eater of Dreams. It was to find a place where I could hurt the main body as much as possible without hitting the tentacles. The body was at least 1 kilometer in diameter, so it was a hard job to find the weak spot. In the meantime, Cheok Jungyung built up his strength. The 1 sword and 2 swords were powerful enough, but they couldn't be compared to the huge force building in my right arm. It was doubtful if this was really the power of an upper-grade constellation. Damn, this is the limit for this body. This much is possible, with the support of probability. Cheok Jungyung grumbled as the accumulation of power was almost finished. Don't be too elated. I don't know if I can cut all the tentacles and hurt the body with this much strength. I guess. The opponent is an outer god after all. Do you have a plan? I asked with a bit of expectation. He spoke so confidently that I thought Cheok Jungyung had a countermeasure. Cheok Jungyung thought for a moment before replying. I will hit him with the 3-sword style and hope he's tired enough to go back. Didn't you say you would protect me? I will protect you. I promised in my name. The strongest person on the Korean peninsula is relying on luck in this situation? I flinched at the magic power that exploded from unbroken faith. Was he angry? However, Cheok Jungyung calmed down. I know the demon of the horizon. The demon of the horizon. I heard this name and glanced at Yu Jung-hyuk, who was still fighting. He didn't seem to be able to listen in on our conversation. Cheok Jungyung continued speaking. I will ask him to send you to another world. There's no time limit on the 9th scenario. If you flee there, you will be able to live for a while. Of course, you will have to take care of things after that. What type of demon has that power? Rather than a demon, he's closer to a god. You don't need to know the details. You would be better off praying not to meet him. I didn't know the relationship between Cheok Jungyung and Demon of the Horizon. I pretended differently, but I knew that name. It was because the Demon of the Horizon was the existence who sent Shin Yu-sung of the 41st regression here, and who supplied the disasters to the Dokjabis. I wasn't sure how Cheok Jungyung knew the Demon of the Horizon, but perhaps he was the one who helped when Cheok Jungyung was exiled from the scenario? Can other people escape this way? Such a large amount of probability isn't allowed. The Dokjabis won't allow it. But once this happens, all the people left here will die. If I ran away, the people here would be swallowed up by the Eater of Dreams and have their story swallowed. Cheok Jungyung clicked his tongue. That isn't any of my business. Don't worry about the others. Take care of your own life. Life is about being alone anyway. As expected of Cheok Jungyung, his life philosophy was very pessimistic due to his life of betrayal. A gap! Run! I used electrification and flew forward with all my speed at Cheok Jungyung's sudden shout. I passed through 2 or 3 tentacles, but there were still 5 or 6 blocking the way. It was dangerous to get closer. There was the place where I should stop. Goryo's first sword. I have an idea. An idea? What is it? Concentrate instead of speaking nonsense. To be honest, it's impossible to kill him with the 3-sword style. You should already know it. The ground that the tentacles touched subsided. It would be instant death if I was touched, no matter Cheok Jungyung's defense. However, Cheok Jungyung's pressure would kill me before the tentacles. I shouted as Cheok Jungyung's power pressed down on me. I'm not saying this to provoke you. Just think about it realistically. Cheok Jungyung's pressure decreased at my words. So, do you have a way to beat that guy? I do. If you help, perhaps I can kill the outer god. Cheok Jungyung laughed in a dumbfounded manner. Kill the outer god? Do you know what you're saying right now? This is an outer god. It would be hard for even those damn Olympus and Vetus guys. There's no way I would say this if it was another god. However, the Eater of Dreams? It might be possible. I'm listening. What's the method? Hurt his body and throw me into it. Cheok Jungyung was confused and at a loss for words. The giant tentacles were coming once again. If you do that, you'll die. You won't survive being eaten by him. Didn't you hear the words of that good-looking guy before? Once you were eaten by him, I will survive. I was convinced as I listened to him. I was certain that I could survive being eaten by this outer god. No constellation, let alone a mortal, could feel this conviction. Cheok Jungyung trembled as if he was incensed and opened his mouth. Is there something you can do? I can't say it's 100%. I might be able to get help from the demon at the horizon through Cheok Jungyung, yet there would still be nothing for me if I survived alone. Escape was a denial of everything I had built up so far. Thus, I chose this approach. The silent Cheok Jungyung suddenly gave a huge laugh. It was a laugh that seemed to fill the plains. I lived long enough to see the day. The day when a man like you believes he can fight against that god. Finally, the upper body of the Eater of Dreams started to be summoned. The first eye that watched the world was revealed. As soon as the gaze of the Eater of Dreams touched on the ground, then sensation filled me with more trepidation than I had ever felt. If I fought this thing, I would die. No matter what I did, I couldn't win against it. Cheok Jungyung sighed. Stupid constellation. Yes. I like you, so don't die. I nodded and ran. The mountain of tentacles soared into the sky. I used electrification, and there was a blue-white trail everywhere I passed. Come, outer god! Cheok Jungyung gripped the sword in my hand. All of Cheok Jungyung's stories were gathered, and the three-sword style was expressed. I, Cheok Jungyung, will cut you! The ether blade increased. The blade that was 10 meters long increased to 20 meters. The blade that was 20 meters long increased to 30 meters. The power that transcended my magic power in my story was falling down here. Three-sword style, three-sword ocean chop. The moment I drew this sword, in my head, I saw Cheok Jungyung standing in front of the sea. Cheok Jungyung watched the sea from dawn to dusk. All the years of watching the sea, looking at the distant horizon until he saw the target. It was one line that distorted the balance of time and space. The waves split apart and the waters had the illusion of splitting. This was a sword made to cut the sea. The constellation Maritime War God admires the power of Gorya's first sword. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon admires the power of the pure human constellation. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband shows great interest in Gorya's first sword. The air exploded and all sound was swallowed. I swung my sword despite feeling like my body was going through a blender. One sword, two swords, three swords? After wielding three swords, the fuse of my consciousness was completely broken. Really, just hold on a moment. Up! Then Cheok Jungyung called out to me. Wake up! Stupid constellation! I barely managed to open my eyes and saw a few strands of tentacles floating in the air. However, the tentacles were no longer what I remembered. 7 of the 12 tentacles had been cut apart and fell to the ground. Cheok Jungyung was an upper-grade constellation. He cut half of the tentacles with his own strength. Nevertheless, Cheok Jungyung spoke like he was angry. I couldn't cause a deep wound because of lacking strength. I couldn't cut him with the sword that cuts the sea. No, this is enough. It's enough for a success. Cheok Jungyung was successful. Beyond the tentacles, there was a huge horizontal scar on the main body. The three-sword style had cut off the tentacles and wounded the main body. It was a small wound compared to the size of the guy, but it was wide enough for me to enter. A pained cry burst out from the Eater of Dreams. I had to run over there. I had to do it right now. Before this wound healed, I must enter the wound. This was the way to end this scenario. The nebula, Vetus, is ridiculing your adversity. Damn it! I wanted to deal a blow to those damn nebula! By the way, the nebula Papyrus is toasting your scenario. My legs didn't move. No matter how much strength I used, my legs wouldn't budge. No, I couldn't even feel my strength. What? The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring is looking at you with sad eyes. I looked down and realized the state I was in. I couldn't see anything below my knees. My lower legs had disappeared like it had been cut by something. Blood constantly flowed from the cut sections. It was probably the world of the tentacles, while I was using the three-sword style. Damn it! I was almost there, yet a situation like this occurred. In the meantime, the duration of electrification ended. Little by little, the injury on the god was healing. It wasn't a constellation I could cross in the state where I lost my lower legs. Kim Dokja. I turned my head and saw the bloody Yu Jungyuk. Yu Jungyuk staggered to me, grabbed me by the collar, and lifted me onto his shoulders. He looked at the wound on the god and asked, I have to throw you over there? Can you do it? Yu Jungyuk didn't answer. He just showed it with his actions. Yu Jungyuk jumped onto what seemed like stairs in the air. He stepped on the tentacles while using air steps. I could hear a slight cracking sound from Yu Jungyuk's body. His body was already at the limit. Even so, Yu Jungyuk didn't give up. He climbed and climbed again. Soon afterwards, the distant wind soaked my cheeks. Yu Jungyuk stopped his magic power and paused. I looked up and the wound on the god was right in front of me. Despite the lack of time, Yu Jungyuk hesitated. He hesitated while holding tightly to my collar. We don't have to hold another funeral, right? I smiled because of Yu Jungyuk's question. Even if I die, I will rise again. That isn't what I mean. Yu Jungyuk's expression was serious. A high wind blew between me and Yu Jungyuk. I looked at him for a moment before asking, do you remember the second scenario? The subway of Oksu Station. It was where Yu Jungyuk first appeared after smashing everything. He was a cold-blooded regressor who would use whatever means necessary for the results. Yu Jungyuk's calm eyes shook at my words. Who would have known at the time? Me and this guy, we would actually end up as companions. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but now I had to. The things that hadn't seemed possible became reality. I was actually going through the scenarios with him. That's why I could now say it. Just like I did when I first met him on the Han River Bridge. This was the way that suited us best. Release your hand and get lost, you damn son of a bitch.